right, good afternoon, people. I tried to make this video once and there was an issue with the sound, so I'm going to do it again. We were having about 30-40% of us making the same sort of errors, so I want to go over some important points about multiplying, dividing base 10 numbers using mental math. So the first thing is, what are base 10 numbers? We talked about them. They're numbers with all 1 and 0s in them. So there we go. So I'll get down. That. There we go. So 10, 1, 1,000, a million, all of those, but also our decimal numbers. So 1,000th, a hundredth, a tenth, a millionth, those are all base 10 numbers. So those are the ones we're working with. And most of the work you've done so far are with these whole number base 10 numbers. So everything that is 10, 100, 1,000, million, those are the ones you've done your math with. And our new learning is the decimal base 10 numbers. So the first mistake that we found that people were making is when they were determining how many place value units to move the decimal by. And we had numbers like this, and when we had a million and we asked how many place values is it, people remember, okay, we're just going to count the zeros. There are 6 place values that take 1 and move them over to 1 million when you move the decimal place over 6 places. The part that people were confusing was this, and that's a decimal number, and it's a thousandth, 1/1000th, but people were making a mistake because they only counted the zeros, and that is the new learning. We have to move that decimal till it's in the ones column. So before, with our whole numbers, we only counted the 0, but basically what you were doing was just moving it until that decimal was right here and left that as a 1. And that's exactly what you're doing here. You're moving the decimal so the 1 is alone in the ones column. So that's important. That was a big piece of learning that kids were getting wrong. And it took us a few days to figure out that that was the reason that they were doing it. The next part is just reviewing the past knowledge so that we can put the new stuff into play. So we know that if we were to multiply, here's your base 10 number, and if we multiplied 5 by a base 10 number that's a whole number, our answer is going to be bigger than our original. And similarly, if we divided by a base 10 whole number, our answer is going to be smaller than our original. We know that. That makes sense. We've done that. So that's the old learning, and you start to get confused with the new learning. What you have to remember is when we're doing, didn't leave enough room there, if we're multiplying now by a decimal, instead of getting a larger quantity, this will become a smaller quantity. So 5 will actually be a smaller number when you're done. And it'll be smaller by 2 decimal places. So 1, 2 is decimal 0.5. I didn't quite leave enough room for me to do it. And here, similarly, if we divide 5 divided by decimal 0.1, before our answer was always going to get smaller, but here when we divide by a decimal base 10, our answers are going to get larger. Again, by 2 place value columns. So that 5 will become a larger number by 2 place values. So it is going to be 500. And that's what is our past learning, our grade 5, our grade 6, even some of it in our grade 4. And then this is our new, right here. All right. So let's take you through what you need to say when you're doing it, because there's an actual little conversation you can have in your head while you're doing it. So let's start. 3 times 100. I know it's an easy one, but you're going to say, okay, that 3 being multiplied by that base 10, it's going to be larger. It's going to be larger by 2 place value units. So if that was your old number, you simply move it to 300. You're moving the decimal to there. Now, we don't have to write that decimal. It just becomes 300. And some of you do it in your head, and some of you actually use this little, tactile thing to move the decimal physically on your paper. Either works. If we had this as a decimal, 4.2 times let's go 100,000. Oh, let's go a million just because I started writing it wrong. We have to move this now by 6 place values. So there was our decimal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And each of these gets filled in by a 0, all the blank spaces. So that number there is 4,200,000. What else can we do with this? We can divide. So if we had 5 divided by 1,000, this number is going to become smaller. It's going to become smaller by 3 decimal places. We know that the decimal place was actually right here, so we move it 3 spots. All right? And that's the old. The new stuff is when we're going to do this with decimals now. So again, if we multiply 3 times decimal 001, before when we multiplied by a whole number, a whole base 10, it got greater. This time it's going to get smaller. So this 3 will become a smaller number. By how many? You have to remember that when you're determining how many place value units in this, the decimal moves until that 1 is in the ones column by itself. So it's 3 place values. We're going to take 3 and make it smaller by 3 place value units. 1, 2, 3. The new decimal will go there. And if you wanted to write it out neater, that's what you'd have. If you multiplied a decimal number, let's go 002 times decimal 01. Again, when we did it before, it would get bigger. Now it's going to get smaller by 2 units. So we're going to take this decimal 002 and make it smaller by 2 place value units. So our decimal number, if we were using the spaces to show us, would look like that. The same for division. The same for division. It's the opposite. So we have 3 divided by decimal 0001. Before, when we divided by a whole number, it got smaller. So we know that this number is actually going to be bigger. 3 will be bigger. Determine how many place values it's going to be bigger. Remember, we have to bring it to that side to make 1 in the ones column. And you'll see we have 4 spots to move that. I have to make the number 3 4 place value columns larger. So if that's 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because we know the decimal would have been right here. Now it's there. Our new number is 30,000. And I think I've done them all. I've divided. I've multiplied. I can start with a decimal here. Divide it by that. It's going to become larger by 3 spots. I'm going to move that decimal 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. My new answer is 7.5. So when you go to do this, people, and you start to get frustrated, here are the 2 key points. In base 10 whole numbers, you count the zeros. In base 10 decimal numbers, you have to count till it's on that side. The second is, you know that 5 times a whole number is going to be a bigger number. That increases. So just make the leap that multiplying it by a decimal number is the opposite, and it will decrease. This 5 will get smaller by 2 place value units. And I'm almost done. 5 divided by a whole number is going to be a smaller number. Okay? So 5 divided by a decimal number is going to be a larger number. It only takes practice, a little bit of logical thinking, and an understanding of how many place values you're moving, and you'll be able to get this just fine. All right, keep practicing. Come see me if you have any questions.